because as far as some, leaders, people with experience are concerned, it's the president, not Ken. So if he justifies that he's using contingency fund to build a cathedral, he couldn't do that without the president. If we are in a crisis where we are being asked to pay more taxes, where people are being asked, obviously, to take haircuts, pensions are being diminished, and as we understand, without the IMF, we are doomed. Yet, within that budget, the budget for economic recovery, out of the crisis, he still makes provision for the cathedral. So much money, more than putting two important other, subsectors of the economy together, what such institutions get. So they say, we have just been, targeting the wrong person. It should be the president. But Dr. Arthur Kennedy, let's see if we get some fresh perspectives on what has transpired as far as the censure vote and the general Ken must go, debates goes.
Yes. Good morning to your audience. It's a privilege to be here. Let me begin by saying I think Speaker Babin handled things appropriately in terms of developing the processes. But I think even before this went into the chamber, a lot of significant things had happened. And I actually agree that the finance minister's position has been untenable for quite some time. Actually, one of the things that those defending him miss is that regardless of the details of what we just saw, we have telegraphed clearly to the world as well as to ourselves in this country that the finance minister does not have the confidence of his country, even if he has the confidence of his president. Now he's negotiating with the IMF, and we have in evolution a deal that everybody thinks will last until 2020, that is even probably into the next government. And the person who is the point person and sitting across from the IMF and making commitments on our behalf, we have already said, according to the president's agreement with the MPP MPs who asked for him to be fired, that, once these negotiations are over, he will leave. That means that he will not be there, in effect, to stand behind the agreements that are being reached as it is being implemented. That, to anybody who knows anything about diplomacy and negotiations in the international arena, is a significant disadvantage. It weakens the hand of the person who is negotiating for us. The second part is domestically. For our budget negotiations, there are times when the finance minister, for example, deals with labor unions and others asking for pay increases and adjustments, and he tells them, look, this year we can do this, but take it from me. This is my word that we will deal with the problems you are raising maybe next year or 6 months down the line or inside agreements, and they shake hands over it. You know the person you are shaking hands with is going to be gone, quote unquote, right after the budget. It undermines the process of negotiation and our confidence in the things that we agree to. To move to the process of how all this happened, it was very fascinating listening to my brother here, but this is a charade because, as Kwesi Prempeh is fond of saying, we minor in majors and we major in minors. Because, in fact, even if the MPP MPs had stayed and this motion of censure had passed, like you pointed out appropriately, it will still be up to the president to decide whether to relieve the finance minister of his position or not. Of course, if it was an impeachment, then it will be different. A motion of censure historically, there are about 3 or 4 US presidents who've been censured by the Senate. It doesn't lead to anything except for the fact that, you feel a little bit embarrassed. But the part that is serious is that, indeed, the MPP MPs, 90 of them went on the record.
95.
95, thank you. On the record and said, Mr. President, this finance minister must go. Then now, the NDC MPs also say, we've been thinking of the same thing, so let's join together and send a signal to the president that indeed it's not just you who have problems. The whole nation has problems with this gentleman. And somehow, the very people who had gone to the president to demand this person's head now won't support a motion of censure. That sounds strange, particularly given the fact that we know from news reports that while they were discussing this and the president and his allies were trying to persuade them to change their minds, some businessmen visited them, and there are reports of whether envelopes were passed and later returned.
Not reports, or they said it themselves to us.
So if this is the case, then it begs the question, is it that apart from the envelopes that were passed and returned, they have received other inducements or pressure or whatever to change their minds? Because it is strange that they did what they did. And not only that, I can't even find an example in history of a majority walking out of chambers. After all, they have the numbers. So if they are against the motion of censure, they can vote against it. So why
this majority doesn't have the numbers? So
well, but my point is you need 2/3 for it to pass. So you know that if your people vote against it, it is going to get anywhere near the 2/3. So the purpose of this is to make sure it fails. So why wouldn't they stay and vote for it? What were they afraid of?
Because it was a secret ballot and some of their members could vote.
Well, that's my point. Is it then that we now elect MPs and we are afraid that they will exercise their conscience in the vote of this?